The time was 3:47 p.m. Location? Kissimmee, Central Florida. It's a muggy, humid afternoon. The kind of mugginess that makes jumping in a lake seem drier than a martini. And yet, despite the unnaturally wet heat, I was wearing a trench coat and a fedora. It was a bad choice. Not Stitch's Great Escape bad, but bad enough. Name's Tap. Tap Gracie. I'm a professional critic, snoop, and licensed horticulturalist. My office is what's the attraction. When my work is your vacation. And your vacation is my work.
Can I once open this door and not find you overplaying some ridiculous bit, dude?
My old colleague, Lieutenant Surferclock. A good egg, smart as they come, loyal to a fault. But there's a reason my name's on the door and not his.
Yeah, you wrote on it, in blue Sharpie. We got a request. Test track.
The last thing I wanted was a case. But I got bills to pay, and horseshoes and hand grenades don't count.
Where is that music coming from, and why are you monologuing?
There's a missing persons case. Test track had been gone for over 48 hours, and nobody had a clue as to her whereabouts.
It's a she.
Like Dick Sargent replacing Dick York on Bewitched. Someone thought they could just replace Miss Track with a feeble attempt at a clone and get away with it. Like William Shatner, yeah. Test Track had aged, gained some weight, and made funny noises when it moved. But replacing with Chris Pine and calling it the same thing? I say nay. Someone had to get to the bottom of the case, and it might as well be me. What do we got on the Vic?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you done monologuing and actually talking to me? Okay, right. From 1982 to 1996, the building was home to a ride called World of Motion. It was a ride about the history of transportation with a glimpse into the future of automobiles. It was mildly successful at best.
Typical parents. All they ever do is yap on and on about how things were. Quit living in the past, Mom and Dad. According to the file, our Vic was born March 17th, 1999. It says here Richard Petty was there for the opening ceremony. Who's the father?
General Motors. They sponsored the ride at first, but now it's just Chevrolet. That's what you meant, right? Because the analogy's lost on me.
What'd I tell you? Smart kid, but you gotta help him out from time to time.
I can hear every word you're saying. You're speaking your monologue out loud.
Everyone loved little Truckee. She was one of Epcot's first thrill rides. She was the fastest in her class. And the fastest in Walt Disney World, topping at speeds of 65 miles per hour. And she loved to show off. Her queue was full of machines testing out all the facets of making a car. Sure, it was loud and gritty, but well-purposed. From there, you took a spin in one of her test vehicles and performed various tests to see how the car handled.
Accelerated hill climb, rough roads, braking, weather hazards, hairpin turns, even the crash test.
Miss Test Track went AWOL in May of 2012. The report says she remained out of sight until December of the same year. Where had she been? And more importantly, why insist this new replacement is her when it really isn't? What is this, the Changeling?
It's called an upgrade. It's the same ride, just better adapted for the future.
Don't put corks in my salad and tell me they're croutons, Lieutenant!
What does that even mean?
I can see this is a sensitive case. Grab your coat, Lieutenant Surferclock. We're gonna start pounding some pavement and asking questions.
It's 98 degrees out.
With wind chill, it's 97. Let's go!
1 hour later...
We arrived on the scene of the crime at 4:52 p.m. I had more questions than answers, like, why Test Track? Why in Epcot's Future World East? Why did she close at the beginning of summer, just before the summer crowds? And above all, who was responsible?
So are we doing the single rider line, or...?
Ah, yes. The single rider line. One of 3 at Mickey's Kingdom. The others at Expedition Everest and Rock and Roller Coaster. I also noticed that she had orange, yellow, and white decor. But this imposter is trying a blue and silver color scheme. Who did these mugs think they're fooling?
Now, here in the queue, no more loud banging machines. It's more about vehicle design than mechanics. Eventually, you are given a card and escorted to a computer monitor. Here, you can design your own car. Body, wheels, paint job, you name it, and record it to your card.
I spoke to the dame who worked there. She told me that those who wait in the Fast Pass line also get a car of their choice, but they're limited to a handful of pre-designed cars. This sounded fishy to me. But before I could grill her for more, she was already assisting guests behind me.
Before you board your vehicle, make sure you tap your card to the reader. Then get in and buckle in. Your car will proceed through a series of tests to test each car's capability. At the conclusion of each test, your car will be shown on a display, ranking your designs from 1st to 6th, based on how well your design choices scored for that particular test compared to the others in the car with you who also designed their own vehicle and scanned their cards.
Seemed as though the lieutenant's custom-designed virtual car outranked my own in all 4 tests as we rode the actual ride vehicle.
And don't worry, folks, you still get that incredible 65-mile-per-hour zoom around on the open-air track. It's a ride highlight that continues to be a major draw.
Don't draw comparisons yet, Lieutenant. Our Vic had all sorts of props to make you feel you were test driving a new car. Road cones, road signs, guardrails. Not anymore. Instead, we get blue neon and LED screens. We went from Detroit to Tron meets the Matrix. Take the blue pill, Kevin Flynn. Take it, wake up, and bring back little 13-year-old Test Track.
Would you stop referring to the old version as a victim?
I will once the kidnappers return us safe and sound. Our parents are counting on us, and I'm still waiting for the check to clear.
Well, at least stop referring to it as her. It's just creepy. And could you please talk normally for the discussion?
Okay, fine. What did you think of Test Track overall?
Now, Test Track, I've always really enjoyed the ride, even in its old incarnation with the Bill McKim and the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that actually felt like it had a story.
And interaction.
Yeah, interaction a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you went through all the lines. You got to see how the vehicles are tested and everything like that. But, I mean, there was less interaction for the guests than there was, as a guest going through a story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in trying to change it, they had great intentions. They're trying to bring the guest more into the experience of testing the vehicles. However, what I feel it lost was personality.
Mm-hmm.
Bill McKim and that nameless secretary, I guess, they had personality, even though she seemed to question everything he said.
She's the one who selected the crash test.
Well, yeah, I suppose.
Spoiler alert.
In any case, the interactivity, before the ride and after the ride even, are major improvements for the people who really like interacting with their rides.
Right.
But I feel like, for me, losing that whole story element and just, you're basically being guided through by a computer.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's more into the modern era, which seems to have sucked out a lot.
Now, consider that we're kind of looking at it as folks who have done Test Track before and watched it change into this new version.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you feel about it?
Well, first, let me talk about it as a kid from the 90s. I mean, you grew up in the 90s with me, too.
Of course.
If you could sum up the 90s in one word, I would say either grunge or grit.
Fair enough.
During the 90s, there was this feel of everything had to be down to earth and dirty and gritty, like grunge music and messy, that kind of thing. And the old Test Track really exemplified that. When you were waiting in the queue, there were all those banging machines that made you feel like you were in a garage and that you were driving around on this dirty pavement road, and it felt cool.
Yeah.
Now that we've turned the millennium, we're feeling things more streamlined and smooth and taking one gentle step into the future. And that's what this attraction has done. In so doing, that's what I think you mean by sucking out a lot of the personality.
Yeah.
It's not so much about testing the car out and seeing how it handles. It's now about more the research and development process, which, don't get me wrong, is still pretty cool.
Yeah.
The queue is pretty cool, but it really lost a lot.
I think the problem is we don't get to see any of that. We're just told, hey, your car now has this, your car now has that.
Yeah.
It doesn't really talk about how we got there.
Mm-hmm.
So while it is a well-meaning step into the future,
Mm-hmm.
I think they could have done a little more to it, bring back that personality.
Yeah. That being said, one of the things I don't like about the attraction most is the pacing. It is slow. When you did the old ride, you went up the hill and then to test the hill climb. Then you went over the rough roads to test that out. Hot and cold. You tested all that stuff out, and there was something every step of the way. But in this one, for the first 2/3 of the ride, you're just kind of gently coasting through all the LED screens and the neon and just kind of looking around. For me, that takes a lot out of it because that's all just a gimmick. Take away all that bright, shiny light stuff, what's left? And that's the same exact track as Test Track used to have.
Okay.
The new stuff of the developing your own car, that is awesome, and I like that, and I applaud it. It's just overwhelming. When I rode it for the first time, I had no clue what was going on, and I was lost. And I'm 26 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If it were someone in their 60s or 70s riding this, they would
Oh,
just...
yeah.
I mean, that's not to say that it's not going to get easier over time, because we're going to eventually be old and be able to take on this stuff like that.
Yes.
But it is very full of pressure your first time and very overwhelming. If you've never ridden Test Track before, I would say it's a 4 out of 5. It's cool, it's fast, it's awesome, and honestly, I really hope this succeeds. But as someone who's ridden Test Track before, I do miss it. And I think in some ways it's a big step up technologically, but it's lost a lot in the process. So I give it a 3.5 out of 5.
And for me, if you've never before experienced it, well, there's no better time. It's going to be really cool for you, but and then for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 4 out of 5 for those who have never experienced Test Track. However, if you have and you're maybe a little reminiscent about the old one, I'm going to go ahead and say it's a 3 out of 5. I think losing the story of it is a much bigger downer for me.
Absolutely.
As far as an overall score, though, I'm just going to go ahead and balance that out, kind of average it, and go ahead and give it an overall score of 3.5 out of 5.
So that you heard it from us, folks. 3.5 out of 5 from the two of us if you've ridden it before, but a 4 if you have not ever ridden the former incarnation of Test Track. But that's just opinion. And it ain't about opinion. It's about facts. And this flat-foot private eye will only accept just the facts, ma'am.
Oh, for crying out loud.
I took another look at the file. It had all the answers I was looking for, plus a few I wasn't. Apparently there's more to this imposter than meets the eye. Like those in wheelchairs and scooters. Wouldn't you say, Lieutenant?
I'm sorry, what?
If it's all the same to you, I'll ask the questions around here. Wheelchairs and scooters. What about them?
Everyone in scooters and wheelchairs need to transfer into the car?
I see. Now what about height? How tall you gotta be?
40 inches or 102 centimeters.
What about deaf folks? Can I ride it if I'm deaf?
Well, closed captioning is available.
What about my vertigo, my scoliosis, my ticker, my unborn child?
Let's see, no heart, back, or neck problems, no motion sickness, no high blood pressure, and no pregnant mothers. Essentially, you want to be in good health overall.
You think you got all the answers, don't you, wise guy?
You do know I'm not a suspect, right?
Very well, Lieutenant. Who do you recommend?
It's for thrill seekers. Even though that part of the ride is short, it's the highlight. The innovation of creating and test driving your own car is enough to interest a lot of people, especially kids. So I'd say the 7 to 35 crowd overall.
Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the good lieutenant was smart. Maybe too smart. I think I'll pay him after all. But it didn't matter anyway, because I knew who the perp was anyhow.
You do?
Yes, I do. It had to be someone close to the case, someone I could trust. Someone just so he could abduct Miss Test Track right out from under me and replace it with a phony baloney imposter. Isn't that right, Lieutenant?
You'll never take me alive, Gracie!
I should have known. It turns out my trusted Lieutenant Surfer Clock was really criminal mastermind and my mortal enemy, Big Boy Surf the Clock. But no time to wallow in self-pity. We meet again someday. After all, I'm Tap Gracie. My work is your vacation, and I always get my man. Case closed.